Hello chess friends and welcome to Jozarov chess channel and welcome back to our Queen's Gambit Declined series. So in this series we're following this very nice opening from white's and from black's perspective, and today we're starting a new series in our Queen's Gambit Declined studies. Today we're starting the so-called Ragozin Defense, and I've been asked many times here on my YouTube channel to start the Ragozin Defense because many beginners love to play this opening because it's a natural opening, it's a healthy opening, because you're bringing your pieces on the most natural squares, you're playing aggressively in the center of the board, so you're basically challenging white from the early stage of the game, and that's exactly what an opening from black's perspective should have. You should be aggressive in an early stage of the game. You just don't want to play passive moves, you don't want to play this d6 b6 slow moves, you just want to play, as I said, in a sharp way. So that's why I think the Ragozin Defense is perfectly fine if you have problems to maybe search for an opening against d4. So in this video I've prepared beautiful traps and tactics that are possible in the Ragozin Defense, and we'll see, I think, so far the most important strategical ideas, and then in the later stage of the series we'll cover, of course, the opening in a deeper way with more strategies, with more ideas in the middle game stage and similar stuff. So if you haven't followed my YouTube chess channel so far, and if you haven't followed maybe this Queen's Gambit Declined series so far, please check out the series also from the beginning. Especially you should check out the Vienna variation that we have finished now recently. So a couple of days ago we have finished the Vienna variation of the Queen's Gambit Declined. It's very important to watch the Vienna variation of the Queen's Gambit Declined combined with the Ragozin Defense that we're starting today, because in the Vienna variation, in the Ragozin Defense, you see similar tactical ideas, maybe not the same, but many times you reach the same position when you're playing maybe the Ragozin in the beginning, or maybe you're playing the Vienna variation of the Queen's Gambit Declined. Many times you reach the same position after a couple more moves. Maybe you just played a different move order, but many times, as I said, you just get the same position. So that's why, as I said, check out the Vienna variation of the Queen's Gambit Declined, because here we'll see also important ideas. You should also check out my Nimzo in the Defense series, because I like to call the Ragozin Defense as the aggressive Nimzo Indian. Let's see the difference. Here, for instance, the Ragozin can be played, maybe even the English opening can be the starting position, but now after move d4, d5, you see now we have reached now the Queen's Gambit Declined, the 3-knight variation. So the move order in the beginning, d4, d5, c4, e6, Queen's Gambit Declined, and after knight to c3, knight to f6, knight to f3, we have now the 3-knight variation. So this was always our cornerstone position, but now the Ragozin move is the move bishop to b4. In the previous analysis, as we said, we have studied the so-called Vienna variation, d takes c4, but this move, d takes c4, you play many times in the Ragozin Defense too. So many times you reach the same position with bishop to b4, and then you play d takes c4, so actually you would reach the Vienna variation. So many times you see that an opening is called the Ragozin Defense, and then the Vienna variation is also written afterwards. So as I said, please check them out because it's very important to watch them combined. And as I said, I like to call the Ragozin Defense as an aggressive Nimzo Indian defense, because in the Nimzo you're playing this move order, e6, and then you wait knight to c3, and then you play something like bishop to b4. I've also covered the Nimzo Indian defense from black's perspective, so you should also check it out, because many ideas of the Nimzo Indian defense are also working in the Ragozin Defense. So that's why I think these three openings are very important to watch combined. So Ragozin Defense, Queen's Gambit Declined, the Vienna variation, and the Nimzo Indian Defense, I think have really similar strategical ideas. Okay, as I said, as promised, here in this video I will show you now the most beautiful tactical trap of the Ragozin Defense. So here, as we said, let's skip to the cornerstone position. So this will be after move here, knight to c3, knight to f3, the 3-knight variation, and bishop to b4. This is now the Ragozin move. We have reached now the Ragozin Defense cornerstone position. So many things can happen now immediately. What we can notice now here is this very annoying pin. It's very important to say that this is now the so-called absolute pin. If you get challenged with the move bishop to g5, this is not an absolute pin. What I mean about this, that you still have the flexibility to move your knight. Okay, you can lose the queen, but there are maybe some tactical traps with knight to e4 and similar stuff, but this is not an absolute pin, so the knight still can move. When we see now the knight in c3, c3, this knight is really pinned. So that's the beauty about our pin, because our pin is absolute, so the knight from c3 cannot move. And you should always consider this, because many times you can face maybe some tactical shots by delivering a check on c3, pinning further knight on e4 and similar stuff. So that's why the absolute pin is of course much better than just a pin against the queen. So after move bishop to g5, many times the normal line would be something like knight from b to d7. We want of course to have a further control of the f6. We want to play c5, liberate our queen, get the queen very active into the game. And when we get the queen into the game, we don't want to have some kind of a risk if we would not have played the move knight to d7. Then if we move the queen, then something like bishop to f6, and after g takes f6 would weaken simply too much our pawn structure here on the king side. So that's why here many times white goes normally with the move e3. Now comes this aggressive move c5, and that's what I love about the Ragozin defense. It's a very aggressive method. Maybe you'll not get something out of it immediately, but at least we're challenging white immediately from an early stage of the game. White needs to be careful here what he's doing, because after c takes d5, many times you see a simplification idea by white. White doesn't want to tolerate this dynamics in the center. White wants to many times I played many times also from white's perspective against the Ragozin, and I really love this move c takes d5. It just releases the pressure a little bit in the center of the board. The game is not so dynamic, many calculations, then you have to make c takes d5 perfectly fine. So after e takes d5, bishop to e2 is already not the best of moves. You have to control first of all the square e4. If bishop to e2 happens, now queen to a5, and you see now that's the beauty about this move knight from b to d7. You see you still have a good control of the f6. So now if even bishop to f6 happens, still we have the opportunity to recapture with the knight. We don't have to of course take with the pawn and mess up our pawn structure. Now many times this mistake is happening by white. I'm not sure why, but believe me or not, many players are playing simply this move queen to c2, and it seems so that it's a natural idea. It's perfectly fine. We're playing further, we're controlling the c3, but now we'll just continue the pressure with the move knight to e4, and here the knight on the bishop on g5 is saying, but the most important thing is that we have here a tension around the square c3. Now white is playing many times this move rook to c1, but now with queen to a2, many times black is getting simply a pawn. It has now a comfortable game. Even if something like, I don't know, kingside castling happens, still you can of course take here bishop takes c3, b takes c3, you release the pressure, just trade some pieces. Even with c4, I think you can lock the position further, and black has, I think, here a comfortable game. We have here of course a 3 versus 1 situation on the queen side, and I think this is simply winning for black. So as I said, this idea with queen to c2 you face many times. I'm not sure why white is playing these mistakes over and over again. Queen to c2 is of course perfectly fine here. Knight to e4, and black is much better. So I wanted to show you again this position. As we said here, for instance, c takes d5, e takes d5. We have here even d takes c5. So you see pardon me, white didn't play the move bishop to e2 or bishop to d3 like in this game before. Even if d takes c5 happens, you should not worry. Again, we play queen to a5, again queen to c2, and now with knight to e4, again the same tactical shot, rook to c1, and now knight to c5, perfectly fine. And you see now, even in this game that I found also on the web, bishop to b5 was played, but it's not possible because queen to b5 is of course not possible here to take by the knight, because the knight is pinned. So many times, as I said, this is for instance a game that is played in FIDE master level, so it's, I think, many times white is not reacting correctly to the spinning idea, so white should be careful. Of course there are better ways, which we'll also see in the continuation of the series, how white should make progress here. But as I said, it's unbelievable how white is making many times the same mistake. So here I wanted to show you also here an example of the Ragozin defense, again with the same position. We have again this idea, c takes d5, after e3 c5, d takes c5, queen to a5, and now after rook to c1, here black plays now an early queen to a2 move, and this is not good. Here black is basically falling into a trap, because queen to a2 is simply not a good move here anymore for black. It seems in the beginning that it's perfectly fine, but you should not consider, or you should not forget about also here the activities of white. White has here this idea, and you see many times now in the continuation of our video this move bishop to f6 as one of the most important tactical ideas here for white. It seems in the beginning that why should you give up here the bishop for a knight, but actually here after move knight to f6 that has to be played. You don't want to take, of course, here with the pawn, because you messing up simply too much the pawn structure. After knight to f6, now the most important thing is that now this move bishop to b5 that we have seen recently in this example before did work. Now it's actually working. You have to cover yourself. Bishop to d7, bishop to d7, knight to d7, kingside castling. You have to here take finally the knight, but now after rook to c3, here white is a comfortable game. Although the material is equal, we have 6 pawns for both sides, but believe me or not, this is simply a beautiful position now for white. So that's not what you should do. You have to pin, you have to liberate first, you have to play knight to e4 if you want to play this idea queen to a2. Now from this point on, white is a dominant game, and I'm seeing especially in this position 4 games for white, and white is winning every game. Pardon me, just one draw happened, so it's now a +2 position here for white. So as I said, this is something that black should not do. So we have here kingside castling, queen to c2. Now in the continuation, something like queen to a5, knight to d5. Here is a beautiful move with c6. We can even include more pieces into the game. Rook to b1, b4. Now the isolated pawn on d5 is also a huge position problem. So as I said, this is something that black should not do. So let's go back. As I said, the idea is clear. After rook to c1, you should not take here the pawn immediately. You can of course proceed here with the move knight to e4 like we talked about. Now if queen to c2 happens, then it's perfectly fine then to play queen to a2, but queen to a2 too early is simply not working here for black. You have to first get out of this attack by the bishop against the knight. So as I said, this will be also deeper explained in the continuation of the series, but just consider every time this idea about the square a2. Sometimes it's possible, sometimes it's not possible. So here I wanted to show again an example how basically, as I said in the beginning, the Vienna variation and the Ragozin defense can be really combined together. Because here in the continuation after e6, knight to c3, bishop to b4, we had this idea, bishop to g5, we have now h6. As we have seen also in our Vienna variation, you could also try d takes c4 followed with h6 and c5. Now here in one particular example that I wanted to show, it was the gameplay by Eric Praj against Mladen Palac. Mladen Palac is my linesman here from Croatia. He played really here a beautiful game with the black pieces. After move h6, here black got challenged with move bishop to f6. We had queen to f6, and now comes an idea here by white, first of all, to control further the c3. Here we have d takes c4, like in the Vienna variation. As we said many times, this is not the Vienna variation of the Queen's Gambit Declined, but again with the same idea, d takes c4, and we want to now play even the move b5, then to fix the pawn structure further, because after b5, knight on b5 could not be a possible move because of the pin by the bishop against the knight. So that's why many times you get this idea, queen to a4, and now after knight to c6, again I'm not sure why white is playing many times this move, knight to e5, and here it seems so that something went wrong for black, because black got challenged here with move knight to c6. You see also the bishop is hanging if the knight is taken, but actually with bishop to d7 everything can be glued together, because even if you try here something like knight to d7, now we have a beautiful counter attack with queen to d4. This is now the beautiful move here by Mladen Palac. Even if you try something like, of course, knight to c6, then you have of course bishop to c3. After something like here b takes c3, still we can take of course with the bishop, and now this bishop is controlling very important angles, so it's a much better position here for black. So as we said here, white could make really this mistake, knight to d7, but now you should not take the knight. That's not the point of this video. You should simply take with queen to d4, and even if something like, I don't know, e3 happens, it doesn't matter. We should still take bishop to c3, rook to c3. Now we take queen takes d7, and here after move bishop to c4, there is now a beautiful simplification idea, knight to e5, and this should be again a winning endgame here, because we have a situation where black is up a pawn. We should probably here simplify the game by trading off the queens, at least maybe even trade off the minor pieces, and white is not having, I think, a good position anymore. So as I said, after move here queen to d4, here Eric Pry tried this idea, rook to d1, and got now punished really in a beautiful way. Bishop to c3, b takes c3, queen to c3, and in this position white resigned. Why did he resign? Because even if you cover with rook to d2, there is now a beautiful way here to proceed. Queenside castling wins the game. Really wild move. Now of course the threat is rook to d7, and you cannot take because of this beautiful pin. So really beautiful tactics. You see how the game can become really wild in the early stage of the game. This is I wanted to also point you out, this is grandmaster level. This game ended only in 12 moves, so it was a beautiful miniature by Mladen Palat in really beautiful tactical game. So I wanted to show you again now a mistake that black is making many times. Also I wanted to show you here, I played one game with the white pieces, but still I wanted to show you this game from black's perspective, because in the beginning it seems so that black is making really good moves, black is making really natural moves, but then got punished because black is getting many times greedy, and you should not be greedy in the Ragozin. Consider every move. Sometimes some things you can take, sometimes some pawns you cannot take, and that's exactly how I should consider it. That's why I think it's very important this video that we see today, because many of this position you will reach many times, and if you don't know what you're doing, you could get smashed in an early stage of the game. So that's why here let's go again to the Ragozin Defense setup. So knight to c3, 3 knights variation, bishop to b4, and here we have this idea. I like always when I play with the white pieces, I simply like to undermine the pressure immediately. I'm simply a chicken player. I just don't like this dynamics in the center of the board, so many times I just trade off some pawns in the center, and here play c takes d5. After e takes d5, now I like also to play, but now even if I get challenged with the move c5, we have seen many opportunities, but now what you could get is this idea h6. And okay, I like this line, although probably this is maybe not the best of ways when it comes to computer relations here to proceed, but I simply like to play this aggressive method, and that's exactly how you should play chess. I think when you have an opening, you should basically try to stuck to your opening prep. If you have maybe some kind of a prep, then you can of course also try some different sidelines, but at least you have to have some kind of a secret weapon for yourself when you're playing against particular opening. This is simply a line that I like to play. I play it many times. Sometimes I lose, sometimes I win, but still this is simply that I like to play. I feel comfortable in this position. So after move bishop to h4, you could get challenged with this move g5, bishop to g3, and now knight to e4. And now comes the tricky part. Here I like to play this gambit line with move knight to d2, and okay, if knight takes g3, h takes g3 happens, there is always this tension a little bit here on the h file. Black could have really positional problems, so that's why many times black is continuing in this way. Knight takes c3, b takes c3, we have bishop to c3, and after rook to c1, what black should not do, and this is now the trap, black should not take the pawn further with the move bishop to d4, because you get now a really beautiful check here, queen to a4, and now even if you cover with the knight, and the rook takes c6, and then okay, black could maybe try bishop to f2, we take, you still take, and now even queen to c6 an opportunity. If you get this idea, bishop to d7, then still we can take out this pawn, and this is I think a much better position here for white. We have 2 minor pieces for the rook, we have still a beautiful activity, and I think in the near future we can just develop, secure the king, include the bishop into the game. So in my opinion, black is tactically losing the game for sure. So as I said, this is not something that black should do. Knight to c3 is so far perfectly fine. Still b takes c3, but now you have to retreat to here a5. Although again, in my opinion, here white should be better, because especially of the fact that you will break in one particular moment this position with the move h4, then I guarantee you it's not a pleasant position anymore for black. We'll see also these lines in the continuation of the series. So as I said, I'll explain you these ideas in a deeper way, but this is just just as I said, this video in which I'm showing you the most important mistakes, and that's something that you should not do. Don't take the pawn on c3 because you could get challenged here. After d4 you could get challenged with move queen to a4. So as I said, it's part of your opening prep, so be careful what you're doing. So here I wanted to show you again also an example of this Ragozin defense after bishop to g5, h6. Now we have g5. Again, sort of a mistake that black is making many times with this idea, knight takes g3. As I said, this could be also line, h takes g3, c6 seems like a perfect move. We're fixing the pawn, e3, and now after queen to f6, many times you get this one, bishop to d3. And you see now white is playing really in a beautiful way. White is doesn't have any more the bishop here, but the h-file attack will be really something that bothers now black in the continuation of the game. And after move bishop to d3, I've seen many times, maybe not in the same way, but in a similar way, this idea. Black wants to simply trade off more pieces, wants to play bishop to f5, but now with queen to f3, here the game is over already, because here the queen is loose on the board. So many times playing with the queen is not so easy in this types of position, especially because you have so many weaknesses here on light squares. You have this backward pawn on h6, still okay, you have the bishop pair, but even in the near future the position could be broken with the move e4 here from white's perspective. So in the continuation of the series we'll cover also the different ideas in this types of positions. So let's see now another example which is also very, very beautiful. I think here again we have this Ragozin defense, but now as I pointed you out, after d takes c4, we have reached now the Queen's Gambit Declined, the Ragozin Defense, the Vienna variation of the Ragozin Defense. So as I said, these lines we have covered already in our Vienna variation. So now if you get challenged, your idea could be perfectly fine to just play d takes c4. And now we're having our preparation that we have covered so far. So as I said, e4 main line, we have now c5, we have seen also this idea, we have e5, we have c takes d4, and again this idea queen to a4, which is in my opinion also playable line for white, knight to c6, and now after queenside castling we have bishop to d7. So this line we have covered also in our series so far. If knight to e4, that would be probably the best line here. It leads now in this complicated line that we have covered so far, bishop to e7. So please check out our previous analysis. In that video we have explained the most important tactical shot. But what white could do is maybe here this line, knight to d4, and now you have to be careful what you're doing. You have to play first bishop to c3, because if e takes f6 happens, then it's not a problem. Still we can take bishop to d4, and the problem is now if you try this idea, of course queen to g5 comes with the check and would take out the pawn, and we're simply up 2 whole pieces, and it's simply game over. So this is something that after bishop to let's go back here after move queenside castling. So as I said, bishop to d7, knight to d4 is not good. Bishop to c3 must move here for black. After knight to c6 we have bishop to e5, really beautiful move, you cannot take it. Now after move queen to b5, here bishop to c7 was played in one game. I found really a beautiful game, Josip Mikhailovich again Brian Nikolov. Here after move bishop to c7, it seems so that many pieces are hanging, of course, that white could actually take here with the move bishop to f6, but now comes this stunner. We have b takes c6, and now even if you take here queen to d8, now comes a beautiful move, bishop to f4 comes first with the check, and now you have to step back, and here then we can take and we can take out the queen, and this is simply a much better position. We have now a situation in which black is up 3 pawns. So as I said, we have covered these lines. Here white has to play knight to e4 instead of knight takes d4, so it's also a common mistake that I think white is making many times. Knight to e4, check out our Vienna variation Queen's Gambit Declined videos. We have covered this dynamic lines for both sides. So here let's see another example. Again, the Vienna variation, the Ragozin Defense of the Queen's Gambit Declined, h6, bishop to f6. After queen to f6, white could play immediately sort of move queen to a4. Okay, we have to cover, that's the only move, knight to c6. We have here c takes d5, e takes d5, and now white is making many times this mistake, knight to e5, the pin. So the main line would be something like, I don't know, e3, normal development, bishop to d3, kingside castling. But you see, when you're playing with the same piece twice in an opening, it breaks a little bit the basic principles in chess. So when you're breaking principles in chess, you have to know a reason why you're doing that. So you just cannot play with the same pieces twice, 3 times in the opening if you don't have a good reason for it. Now, I don't think that this is simply enough here. Here for white. White played this aggressive method, hopes to get the knight and also then afterwards the bishop, but now black simply castles. And you see now how important it is to play fast development, how important it is to develop the pieces on the most active square, how it's very important to secure the king by castling. It's when we watch now white's position, white is 1, maybe 2, 3 more moves far away from fully developing from castling. So it's a huge problem. Maybe even 4 or 5 moves you need just in order to secure the king, and simply too slow because black is doing something. And you see now, okay, black got challenged with this move, knight to c6. We have here bishop to c3, intermediate check, very important. Now after move b takes c6, it seems so that this is an equal position. So white maybe has prepared this kind of stuff at home in hopes that this is a perfect position, because the bishop here on c8 is not a good piece. It's blocked out by its own pawn structure a little bit. Maybe this weakness on c6 is something that bothers here black in the continuation of the game, but actually white is lacking in development. You see now here in one game that I found, it was Luis Santa against Nikola Mitkov. Nikola Mitkov shows basically the basic problems about this opening. Even if you try to develop, you can play e3 or g3. Let's see also e3, what can happen. Then you play queen to g6, and you're not allowing here this bishop to come into the game, because if that happens, of course, the pawn is hanging. If white castles here on the queen side, I think it's a huge positional problem. The queen side is a little bit too naked here. There are no pieces that could cover the king, so the king could be endangered here. So you cannot develop yourself. That's the most important thing. Even if you try g3 now, we just play bishop to g4. You maybe try this idea, but now with queen to d3, look at the light square problems. The king is simply stuck there. Meanwhile, we can then play rook to b8 and include now all of the pieces in the attack, also this other rook into the game. So strategically and tactically, white is simply lost. So in this game, here g3 was played. Now rook to b8, getting use of this open file. We have bishop to g2, and you see now rook to b2, normal move. So we have here bishop to f3, covering the square, and now here rook to e8, really beautiful attacking here. Now also the threat is queen to f3, taking the bishop, because you can take of the activity, because of the activity of the rook. So here after rook to e8, in this position, actually here white resigns. So okay, maybe the game could be prolonged with some ideas. So also bishop to h3 would be a possibility, but as I said, here after move rook to e8, white realized this positional problems and lost the game eventually. So here, even if you castle, then of course we can play rook from we could play bishop to h3, then you have to move the rook somewhere, and now here after rook from e to e2, this is now a beautiful position. You could take this one, we can play rook to e2, and now queen to f3 leads into a complicated game. Here you could get this tactical shot, so it's a huge positional problem. So you could lose the battle. White realized these ideas and got punished eventually because it didn't secure the king by castling, and it was a huge positional problem. So be careful what you're doing when you this is, I think, a beautiful example that shows how you should not play with the same piece twice in the opening. Don't do that if you don't have a clear reason why you're doing it. In this scenario, I think black has proved the point. Black has showed that it's a perfect attack, and white didn't find good counterplay here at all. So let's see now another example, and this shows again sort of a, I think, mistake by black that black is making many times. Here after c5 we have again this idea, a3. We have after a3 you have to now play bishop to c3, and now comes also a critical moment here for white. White has now the opportunity to take with b takes c3, and this is not a good position anymore for white, because after b takes c3 now we can play c4 immediately, and this is paralyzing now the whole queen side. We can notice that there are many light square weaknesses. What white could do also here is to play queen to c3, then we can play knight to e4. You see we're playing an attack against the queen, and even if the queen moves now to c4, pardon me, to c2, then you still have this opportunity to play c4. Notice that after move a3 that is challenging the bishop, here we have several light square problems, and even if white challenges now here the position with the move b3, still you can play b5, and even if a4 happens, then you can play something like queen to a5, because if the bishop gets here, then you have the opportunity to push further. c3, you can play then afterwards b4, and I think strategically the game is over. So as I said, this is already sort of a mistake that white is making. Bishop to b4, queen to b3. Now you can play a5 or c5. You have to support your further bishop, because that's your point. The whole point of the Ragozin defense is just to develop the dark square bishop in an active way. So that's why you have to support your bishop. But now after c takes d5, e takes d5, you could get challenged with the move a3. Now you take it, whatever white does, even with the pawn, as we said, c4 is causing now many positional problems. Queen to c2 can be met, of course, with g6, f5, also very, very annoying to handle. Knight to d7. So in my opinion, this is a good position now for black. Knight to e4, maybe with queen to a5 is also good. Bishop to f5 afterwards, so the queen is getting more and more endangered here. So in the game that I found also, here queen to c3 was played. Now again knight to e4. Here we had queen to e3, trying to get the queen into the game in an active way, but here kingside castling is solving now all of the position problems. So we hit here g3, now rook to e8, and here white is already in serious problems. We had queen to f4, getting out of this tactical mess on the e file, but now with c takes d4, bishop to g2, now knight to c5, threatening also the fork. Here we have knight to e4, knight to e5, queen to f6, and now after queen to f6, g takes f6. Here it was a game played by Martin Holland against Jiri Riedel. Here it shows basically again the problems around the square b3. Notice that these ideas sometimes are not working here for white, because in this particular game white resigned immediately. After knight to b3, we have this idea. If the rook moves here to b1, then of course bishop to f5, and the rook is lost. So the light square problems after a3 are something that bother, I think, white in the continuation of the game. It's, I think, also a common mistake that white is doing here, giving up the light squares here, losing the battle on light squares. Now after bishop to c3, whatever white does, b takes c3 causes again positional problems. Queen to c3 we have seen can be met. Knight to e4, queen to e3, kingside castling, knight to c6, further progress, rook to e1. So even as we said, bishop to f5, maybe even bishop to d7, bishop to b5. So the flexibility of the light square problems that we can cause are really a problem for black. So pardon me, for white. So here let's see now another example, and this is really a perfect example of bad play by black. This is happening many times. I've been there, believe me. I've made this similar mistakes many times. Knight to d7, perfectly fine. We have seen this line, c takes d5, e takes d5, and now white plays a move that is very common in the Ragozin defense, knight to d2. White is covering, first of all, this diagonal, so the pin is not so intense anymore. So with the move knight to d2, now you could make here this mistake, h6. And in the beginning, it seems like a normal idea to play the game like this, h6. What should we do? Of course, we can kick away the bishop. If bishop to f6 happens now, the problem is now, if you take with the queen, then you get knight to d5 and you lose the pawn. Even if you take here with the knight, then you get this one, queen to a4, and you lose the bishop. So these things happen many times. I've been there, believe me. Lost the bishop many times in Ragozin defense, in Nimzo Indian defense, in similar ideas. When you bring out the bishop in an early stage of the game with bishop to b4, queen to a4, you could get challenged. So be careful until, of course, the knight is here on d7. This is not working because it doesn't matter. But now you see with the move h6, white got challenged, took simply bishop to f6, even if g takes f6, and of course knight to d5 is going to happen, queen to f6 with the same idea. So here I really don't want to show you now the whole game, that's not the point, but white lost, pardon me, white won the game very easily. So here I wanted to show you really a miniature. It was really a huge blunder that Magnus Carlsen did here. Here he played the Ragozin defense against Hikaru Nakamura. We had this line, queen to a4, which will also cover in the continuation of the series. This is one of the best methods, I think, for white to counterplay the Ragozin, because white after move queen to a4 forces now black to play the move knight to c6, and that's the beauty about this line, because many times we have seen that white has problems after move c5 that black is playing. So black is playing this aggressive methods in the center. So now with the move knight to c6, we're stopping at least this potential progress. So we'll cover also this methods here for both sides. But okay, after move knight to c6, here e3 was played. Here we have kingside castling by Magnus Carlsen. We have queen to c2 by Hikaru, rook to e8, bishop to d2, and now I think comes also a problem that many times black is forcing simply too much here in the center. What black hopes for that the position in the center could be aggressive, but now okay, we have here this idea, d takes e5, knight to e5, we have c takes d5, and here after move knight to f3, g takes f3, here after move knight to d5, here Magnus Carlsen thought, okay, I will take, then I will take also the knight, but the problem is now this problem about the bishop on b4. Again, the bishop on b4 is a tactical problem for black. After queen to d5, here Hikaru simply took bishop to b4. Okay, Magnus had his fun a little bit with the move queen to f3, but now after rook to g1, bishop to g2 can be played, and of course also queenside castling is now an opportunity, of course, when the queen moves from this diagonal. So after move rook to g1, we have bishop to f5, queen to e2, we have queen to e4, bishop to c3, bishop to g6, and after queen to c4 in this position, Magnus Carlsen after 70 moves resigned. So really wild stuff. Be careful with the Ragozin bishop on b4. It can be really in target. Sometimes in some occasions we have seen now two ways how you could lose maybe the bishop. Be careful, but in my opinion, as I said, we have seen also beautiful ideas in the Ragozin for black, for white. So in the continuation of the series, we're covering this very nice opening. So okay, I hope that you got the grip a little bit. This will be a very aggressive opening in the continuation. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as I said, please check out also our Queen's Gambit Declined, the Vienna variation, because we have covered most important ideas about the opening, which also are meaning with the same ideas like in the Ragozin defense. So as I said, we'll have now really fun with this beautiful defense, and be prepared. This will be a wild session. So okay, if you want to see also some other Queen's Gambit Declined studies, check out our series before with some other ideas like the Harvard's attack, like the Ragozin defense, and many more. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.